Hey, this is going to be part one. I don't know how many series I'm gonna do for this, but I'm gonna try to do as many as I can that is tangible to elaborating more on my experience and how I personally feel I qualify or I maybe meet more moderate support needs rather than low support needs in general for myself. But I want to make sure I create like a disclaimer as well. So as I mentioned in more my original video introducing this series for myself, I am in no way trying to say that we should self-diagnose our different support needs. No, I want to make a disclaimer that I'm doing this for myself in order to bring more awareness and hopefully more discussion when it comes to support needs and what that looks like. Because I was just asking Callie and some of my other friends who are very much on the research side of this, being autistic, and they don't really have, there's nothing really that helps to classify support needs. And that's a shame because we need that research and we need better criteria so we can understand these differences in support needs. And it's also something to be aware of is that because support needs and clinician bias criteria and stuff like that isn't so clear from region to country and from different areas as well. Somebody who may seem more like medium support needs or high support needs may not be given that support need level because they're speaking or again because of clinician bias. So this isn't in any way for somebody to try to negate somebody's clinical diagnosis of a support need. It's again just something we need to reflect on when it comes to clinician bias and diagnoses in the medical field. But I really hope we can gain more research, actual research to show how important it is to get more classification within support needs, because I think for me, this is a part of autism that can really help this community in understanding how it's such a spectrum and how we differ in that spectrum. You show an image, and I would recommend following this creator because I was recommended by my friend Eiken about this post, and it was actually very helpful in summarizing the different support needs as best as they could. So this is the kind of summary that Mantis ND has awesomely put together to kind of break down what somewhat falls into moderate support needs. For me, I hit pretty much all of these these areas. And it's very eye-opening to me because as far as the verbal or this issue here with verbal or experience verbal shutdowns, I have said in many of my videos that as a kid I had experienced selective mutism and or issues with speaking growing up, and that I basically was told and always classified as a very extremely shy person, and I never understood that this was a problem for me until I got older, and it became increasingly harder for me to be taken seriously, especially when I got into college and wanted to be able to be more outspoken. And so therefore I forced myself to join things that were very uncomfortable for me, like speech team and getting into a lot of extracurriculars that made me become a leader, or I was involved in leadership stuff because I didn't want to keep feeling like I couldn't speak and I had so much to say. So I honestly wasn't very verbal with most people until I was in college, and that was when I was about 18 or 19 years old. So an experience that is very prominent in my mind that is to me very exemplary of basically a lot of experiences of me going non-speaking is when I have a verbal shutdown, when I'm extremely overwhelmed and like afraid. And a lot of the times I had a lot of verbal shutdowns because I had to stay quiet, otherwise I would it would result in a meltdown. So one experience that I think is indicative of this is when I was on a climbing trip with my husband. Before we got married, we were dating, and it was pretty much the early phases of us dating, and we were on this really long climb, and it was probably one of my first ones that I've ever done that was a longer climb, and I wasn't really prepared for it. I was also scared because it's like there was so much happening. Like I had to bring up our stuff, so I was holding a backpack, and again, this is way before I even suspected that I was autistic, but now looking back, I became increasingly more frustrated and scared because there was all this sensory stuff that was happening. I was having trouble with the backpack. I was having trouble carrying this extra load because it wasn't something I was used to when it came to climbing in general, so it became even harder for me to climb. And then when you do certain climbs, as a follower, you pick out the pieces that allow the climber to go up and to, you know, keep you safe and stabilized. So I was doing that, and there's so much going on that I was overwhelmed and also just scared of the height factor, even though I love climbing and I love heights. And so when we reached a certain point in the climb, when we were taking a break and we can go further, I had a verbal shutdown. I couldn't speak because I was so scared. And he asked me, "Do you want to keep going?" And I literally couldn't say anything. I was so scared. I was so frustrated at myself. There were so many things happening, and I was just like, but to him, right, it looked like I was just being mean, like I was being mad at him. And there was so much other stuff that I literally could not say. And this became because it was an early stage of our relationship where it was a big deal to him, and he got really frustrated. We had to go down on the climb. It was also a long walk back to the car from where we set up for the climb. I didn't speak the whole time. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to explain it. I was also extremely embarrassed because I was like, why can't I say anything? And I ended up on the way home, or like when we were driving back, I ended up texting him what was going on. And for me, writing has always been my main source of communication, where I have been able to be more eloquent, understanding, articulate, and actually verbalize things that are in my mind versus speaking. And he was like, "This is weird that you're texting this to me, but okay." And to me though, when I texted that, and even to this day, I was like, why is that weird? Like, I'm more comfortable texting. But again, it's like this kind of, priority that if you can speak, you should speak. And you aren't really able, or it's not acceptable to communicate in a different way. And that experience is very, very indicative of me having so many of these verbal shutdowns, even to this day as a 31-year adult.